Well, it's been officially a 6-week campaign, but of course it's been much longer than that. And certainly the current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, heading this Conservative government, has wanted this election all along. What is absolutely fascinating and gripping is that whoever has the keys to Downing Street, whether Boris Johnson is the next Prime Minister or whether the main opposition leader, the Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, becomes the next Prime Minister and gets the keys to Downing Street, they have very different visions for this country. And so it looks very much like this third election in just under 5 years, this third general election, is going to be very significant. Now, of course, as you said, we'll have that first exit poll at 10 p.m. British time, but the mood has really, I think, the campaign's been a fairly flat one. What we don't know, and it's very difficult to predict, is the outcome. It's been really 650 constituencies up and down the United Kingdom on what is a winter election for the first time in almost a century, and a lot is hanging on that, or for Brexit, for example, just to speak of that, or the National Health Service. Those are, of course, the two biggest issues, Brexit dominating largely. And the mood is quite fascinating. I am told, in the south of London, in the British capital, there are long queues, and have been since early this morning. And yet, I spoke, for example, to the cab driver on the way here, and to many other people besides, who tell me they're either conflicted and not necessarily going to vote the way they would have voted had there been this early general election, or others are simply not going to vote, because what has happened, and one of the characteristics is that those two men, Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson, are really polarising both support and real fight against them and certain controversy. So it's really going to be fascinating to see if Boris Johnson gets that working majority that he very much wants.
Now, Benedict, as you say, this is clearly a very important election, but when will we get a clear sense of the results? Walk us through, if you can, the possible scenarios in the next 24 hours or so.
So, polls opened at 7 a.m. local time. They close at 10 p.m. British time. And it is just about a minute or two after that British broadcasters will actually publish and broadcast that exit poll. Now, we believe that unlike ordinary polls, that exit poll in the last 3 general elections has been quite good and trustworthy. Of course, there's no telling whether it will be this time. But I think it's the interpretation that we'll begin to see. The first results of people, let's remember, vote for 650 MPs, not for a Prime Minister. There is no president. We have a head of state, and that's the Queen. But I think that what I was just saying about that polarisation, about whether people want a Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister or a Boris Johnson Prime Minister, is very much uppermost in people's minds. So it could be that the picture is too complicated and that we'll have to wait till 2 a.m. local time, 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or even later. That will be really the big suspense that we'll wait to hear. And as I said, two very different visions for the country. Boris Johnson, if he is elected Prime Minister, will want to push through what we call here the WOB, the Withdrawal Agreement, through Parliament. And that is also why we are standing outside Parliament. It's because he very much wants to change the makeup of Parliament to try and push Brexit through this new deadline of the 31st of January and divorce the other 27 EU countries by that deadline, having missed the 29th of March, his predecessor did, Theresa May, and then the 31st of October, which Boris Johnson did. So we'll see. But Jeremy Corbyn very much wants nationalisation of rail, of water, of electricity, a very, very different vision, and a much bigger spending bill, which for some people is criticised. But criticism for really both mainstream parties. What role will social media play? Because although we are bound by very strict rules, social media is not, and that is alive and kicking. One of the traditions here is dogs at polling stations. So if our viewers, besides following our really going through the analysis for the general election, want to look at a lighter side, they can go #dogs at polling stations.